Welcome to Empower Her Radio, the space for powerhouse women ready to step into their next level of abundance, purpose, and personal freedom. I'm Dr. Corey Winn, a high performance coach, doctor of physical therapy, philanthropist, and business consultant. I help ambitious women align with their highest calling, expand their wealth and impact, and create a life that feels as good as it looks. If you're a high achieving woman who's built success yet finds yourself craving more alignment, more purpose, more ease, you're in the right place. Here, we bridge the gap between ambition and fulfillment. Through transformative conversations and proven strategies, you'll gain the courage to step into the fullest expression of you. Build a powerhouse business that aligns with your expertise and divine gifts, and lead your life, both personally and professionally, with unshakable confidence, worthiness, and compassion. This is about expansion, legacy, and owning your power unapologetically. You already have everything inside of you to create a life of unlimited possibility. It's time to unlock it. Welcome to your next level. Let's dive in. Today, I am so excited to introduce Andrea Johnson. She's the founder of the Intentional Optimist, a Maxwell Leadership Team executive coach, a certified DISC consultant, and the creator of the Core Values Blueprint. Her work helps women define who they are at their core so they can lead with confidence, make aligned decisions, and model resilient, value-based leadership. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Corey. Could you come introduce me everywhere I go? I just walk in a room and this is Andrea Johnson.
I love it. We were just talking before we started recording about all that you're doing. So tell us about your journey. How did you get where you are and what kind of made you pivot throughout?
Well, I have not even really, I'd love to say, well, I have a traditional upbringing, that kind of thing. I don't. My dad was a pastor. I was raised overseas as a missionary kid. So I grew up internationally,
Mm-hmm.
which I did not appreciate at the time. I watched my mom kind of navigate her way through a world that was very male dominated
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how to make a difference and make an impact where she was without ruffling too many feathers, because she was a good Southeast Texas girl and a pastor's
Oh,
wife and
yeah.
missionary wife. No, you don't do that, right? And so, but then I watched them come home off the field. She was actually head of all Red Cross volunteers for Asia and the Pacific for quite a long
Oh,
time.
wow.
Yeah, she received the Clara Barton Award from the International Red Cross, went to Geneva, the whole thing. And that's a big deal. I mean, she had a volunteer GS-14 position. So that's basically a colonel in, if she was getting that pay. And boy, if she had gotten that pay, we would have been so much better off as missionaries. But, it is what it is. And but she did what she could. And I watched that and I tried to play within all the rules. I was always the strong kid. I was always the strong girl who, even by blessed sainted mother, who we lost in 2017 to breast cancer, after a very valiant fight, even said things to me like, not everybody wants to hear your opinion. And if you would just keep your mouth shut for a while, people might, boys would like you more. And I'm like, they're going to figure it out. I mean, it's like,
I
especially
hear
when,
that so much. I grew up in
yeah,
the South too.
ah,
So much of that resonates with my story.
I mean, it just, and bless their hearts, and we hear that kind of thing. It's like, bless your heart. It's like, I don't ride the short bus, thank you. But no, I watched her come home to the States and then take administrative assistant jobs when she had been the equivalent of a colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And that never set well with me. But I really tried to play inside all the rules. And I tried to be an entrepreneur a couple of times. I was a Amway person, I was a Mary Kay person, but realized fairly quickly that I can't sell somebody else's ideas, which, when I look back on that and I think about all the years that I subscribed to and put myself to someone else's ideas and someone else's idea of who I needed to be and what a woman is supposed to look like and what a good Christian woman is supposed to look like, or and the box that I put myself in, I don't know why I couldn't learn the bigger life lessons from the smaller business failures, but
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't. And that's, I think, a testament to how we're conditioned as women and we are conditioned to make sure that we play by all the rules. And by golly, even though they didn't make 70% of what the men made in there, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one, and I'm going to play by all the rules. Well, the rules are all for men.
Right.
And it took me a really, really, really long time to get to the place where I was willing to say, these rules really suck and they don't serve anybody, and I'm not playing by these rules anymore. And it took infertility, gastric bypass, adoption, my mom's cancer journey, and losing her when I was 50 years old with an 8-year-old adopted son who she absolutely adored and called her sugar cookie. It took that crucible of all those things coming together in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. So if you know anything about 2017 and what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia with the Unite the Right rally and subsequent death of Heather Heyer, it was a year. It was a year that just said to me, Andrea, you can't do this anymore. And I had spent a long career in pretty decent career in higher education. Like I said, or maybe that was before we started recording. I met my husband in grad school, and then I went to work at Johns Hopkins University in the medical center and University of Virginia. And these are both very prestigious schools, and I was in the schools of medicine and research administration. I handled a lot of, millions and millions of dollars of budget money and grant money, and I learned pretty quickly when I got into the management area, the side of things, that I like to help people grow. I don't want to manage people. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really hard but it's where I cut my teeth on what I do now. It's where I cut my teeth on, hey, tell me what your goals are for the year. Well, here's my job description and here's my goals. Okay, that's your job description. That's the baseline. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, the what? I'm like, you don't have to like do 10 times your job, but I need to know who you are. Why are you here? What do you want to do? And
And
people
what is it about that you don't like that's outside of your job?
Yes. And
Just job.
what maybe could you bring to the department that would make us all better? What do you see that we need to fix? And their eyes would just like become saucers. They just didn't know what to do with this. And I wish I could say I had some amazing managers and I didn't. I had a lot of people in these big institutions that are there for the long haul, and they're going to clock in and clock out and go home. And I'm just not that person.
Right.
And so at 50, when I said, you know what, I don't want my next 50 years to be this way. I'm going to be optimistic, and I don't want my next 50 years to be this way. I looked at so many things about my mom because, when you reflect, if you've lost someone close to you, then you know what it's like to reflect through that grief and to say, what are the things I loved about them? Because there are plenty of things we don't like about any given person on the planet. And it's really easy to focus on that, especially daughters and mothers.
Mhm.
And I just said, I don't want to focus on those things. I want to focus on what I loved about her. And are there things in her behavior or her journey or her strength that I want to emulate? And then it helped me to start recognizing the things in me that are strengths that I said, okay, but if I bring all of that to the table, who could I be? What could I do? How could I be different? And I got to tell you, 8 years later, yeah, I'll be 59 actually in August. Nearly 9 years later, I'm still on that journey,
Mhm.
but but I've taken that leap. I've taken the faith jump of saying, I need to reach out a hand to other women who are going to get on this road earlier in their life than I did. I love working with millennials. They're in the right spot for me. It's like I wish somebody when I was 30 to 35 or 40 had said, there's a different way to do this.
Yes. Yes.
That's kind of my sweet spot, and especially really powerful driven women. I get cold chills thinking about it, like purpose driven women who really want to make a difference. But I help them lead with authenticity and impact. That's my goal. And so I hope that wasn't too long winded. I think that's
Not
a
at
pretty
all.
good arc of kind of where I've been and where I'm headed.
Well, and I think that that speaks so heavily to every woman who listens to this show and every person in the audience today, because so many of us, especially Southern women, Southern
Hmm.
grew up in Christian households women, were told to be seen and not heard.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wait for the boy to call you. Don't call him too many times. I can't tell you how many times I heard that at home.
My grandmother sat me down and said, "Are you chasing him?" And I'm like, "Am I what?"
Yes, yes. And that you toe this line and you check these boxes,
Mhm,
and to hear more and more women who I'm surrounding myself with say, no, I'm not doing it that way.
mhm,
No, that's not what I want my future to look like. No, I'm dying inside in this
mhm,
job with this manager, with these peers who are just checking the box. I was meant for more. And
mm,
I hope that our audience today hears all of that, because so many of us, make ourselves smaller and we
mhm,
shrink to the world, and we find ourselves one day going, what have I done? I mean, I turned 40 this year,
mm.
and I thought,
Congratulations. You're entering the good
four
years.
four decades of my life
Yeah,
is already gone. What have I done
right.
with it?
Mhm.
And what can I do with the next however many decades? So
Good.
you talk so much about purpose-driven women, value-driven women. How have you helped them link their core values, find their core values, and what does it mean to lead in that way?
So I just had a conversation this I guess it was Monday of this week. I mentioned earlier that I'm getting back into the education space. I
Mhm.
left the University of Virginia, and I think one of the things I enjoyed about being in that atmosphere, even though I wasn't a student any longer, I am 30 years out from finishing my master's, which I think I will probably go back within the next year or two to finish. It's in theology, which is, for some people, it's like, what? But it's not an MBA or anything. It's a big degree. It's a master's of divinity. And but one of the things I enjoyed about being in the atmosphere of academics was people having higher level conversations, not the
Mhm.
staff, the fellows and the residents and the principal investigators, the doctors would come and talk to me about things. And some of them were life and some of them were their work. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I loved about it was it meant that I could go deep on certain things. And I could, because I am really a philosopher at heart and a philosopher theologian. And so on Monday, I met with a team that I'm working with through another university here in Virginia. And we're developing a leadership curriculum course. It's a certification course, about 8 hours worth, asynchronous, but can be taken inside an organization for novice and intermediate leaders. And it's a values based approach. And the very first module is like totally my wheelhouse. And I literally said the words, this is a hill I am willing to die on. And they started laughing because the project manager who recruited me to be on this team was like, I've never heard anybody talk about core values this way. And I'm like, well, let me school you, brother. Because
Yes.
the way I actually, and I do work with the local chamber where I teach in their leader lab, because I want people to understand that there are things about you that are inherent, that you were born with. From a Christian perspective, I would call it this is the image of God, the Imago Dei. It is your non negotiables. It is the things that would make you walk away from a relationship or run to a relationship. It's a
Mhm.
thing that will make a job like Joe versus the volcano, where the lights are sucking the life out of you, to
Uh-huh.
the job that, like Ted Lasso, where you just can't wait to be there. I mean, it
Yes.
just those things about you, and there's probably 3 to 5 for each individual person. They're not you can't really see them, they're not tangible, but their results the results of them being honored or dishonored is very tangible. For instance, many of my clients have a core value, people will define it, like, they'll call it respect, but it's defined in many different ways. Our core values are inherent, they are reciprocal. So if it's a core value of respect, Corey, if you're disrespected, I'm going to be just as angry for you to be disrespected as if somebody disrespected me, right? It's that important. It shows up
Right.
everywhere. When you step on that last nerve and you poke it that one last time, there will be blowback. I mean, it's just even for the most introverted and shy and quiet of people, they have non-negotiables. They might quiet quit. They might walk away quietly, but they're going to do it.
Right.
And if we live in a way that doesn't honor those core values that we have. And I'm not talking about the things we value,
Right.
the
Right.
things we value might be family and time and even our country or our religion or our faith practice, whatever. those are things we value, but who we are is is what drives us to those things. One of my core values is belonging. I can find that in my family. I can find that in my personal faith. I could find that in religion. I've deconstructed a lot of it, so I don't find as much of that there now. But I find it sometimes in a workplace. But it's belonging is still the thing. If a close friend of mine leaves me out, they're like, oh, we're just feeling FOMO. It's like FOMO is a real thing for somebody who has belonging as a core value. I don't know how to explain that to someone else. So when I talk about core values, they are those intrinsic things about you that make you, Corey, so unique that most people looking at you, even if you wouldn't acknowledge it, would say, oh yeah, there's this thing about her. Don't do this. Don't cross that line.
My husband would probably be able to point
Yes.
something.
And there are different ways that I help people uncover them. One of them is thinking about 5 people around you and what are the things that they would say would be your non-negotiables. 5 people who are close to you. If you have children, if you have a spouse, a sister, a brother, a family, or close coworkers. And sometimes it's good to actually do that exercise with thinking about people from very different walks of your life,
Mhm,
because that also will help you figure out if you're living differently in one area than another.
mhm,
Um, and if someone at your job doesn't have any idea that, and this is like going to hit back to that whole upbringing of being a Christian, if somebody at your job has no idea that faith is something that's strong for you probably have some evaluating to do, right? It's like if nobody around you knows that you have specific things that you're living out as a practice, then you don't have to be like evangelistic about it. It's just, there's things, and we're taught that, right? So it's the same deal. But then once you understand who you are, it makes your decisions so much more simple. It
mhm,
means that your boundaries are very well defined.
mhm,
And this is another piece that I talk with women about a lot, especially if they're a CEO or a founder, somebody who started their own business, maybe they have 50 to 100 employees now, or even just 10 employees, or even have a family of, several kids,
mhm,
mixed families, blended families. This boundaries are a big deal. And
mhm,
understanding that boundaries don't happen out here, boundaries
mhm,
happen in here.
mhm,
When you understand your core values, then it's easy to draw those boundary lines. I like to give the example of a house. I have a house we bought north of Charlottesville, outside of that county because it was too expensive. But so we
uh-huh.
ended up with 3/4 of an acre. I live on a 45-mile-an-hour road, and I planted some forsythia bushes up at the front. I just recently pruned them. They
Oh,
were above my
yeah.
head.
I
But
love
people,
forsythia.
oh, they're hello, spring is here, right? For the
Yes.
um, but people walk on the inside of those because I planted them too close to the road.
Mhm,
And I allow people to walk inside that boundary because I know that that's not a realistic boundary. I put that out there. Nobody, Corey, walks up to my house and walks in the front door
right.
unless they're related to me. And usually, even my sister doesn't do that. My dad rings the doorbell or knocks on the door. So people understand that is a natural boundary line. Most
Mhm,
people don't even cross into my yard without asking unless they're clearly just walking. When we understand our core values, it kind of, and I hate to say erects, but it builds a confidence in us that is a little bit like having a house on a property where people look at you and go, oh, that's a line that I'm not going to cross with her because it's something that matters, and this is where her natural boundaries are. And my goal is to work, especially with female leaders, to help them get to the place where they understand that many times what happens is it's not just that we leave the door wide open on our boundaries, and it's not that that we've knocked our own fences down. It's that we've knocked our walls down, and we're
mhm,
hiding in the basement as if a tornado is coming through. And the reality is we've either never
mhm.
built the walls or never put them up. And
Right.
we're living in one core value, and it's the one thing that's going to be the nope, I'm nobody's crossing that line. And what happens is I help them come out and say, I'm the one who knocked these walls down. Doggone it. I'm going to put them back up. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to build my own house and I'm going to live here comfortably.
Right.
And then they can lead with whatever passion they have. They can lead with the purpose that they started their business or they got into the kind of work, if they're a lawyer or a doctor or something, that they want to do. So that's
Right.
my passion.
Well, and all through all of this conversation, the thing for me that kept coming up is integrity, integrity,
Mhm.
integrity, integrity, and trust.
Yes.
And I'm quick to show that I'm full of integrity and to quick to trust. But the moment that I lose that in you,
Yeah.
done. And I think back to prior jobs and prior
Mm.
friendships and things and think that was it.
Yeah.
It was a trust integrity situation. It was nothing
Mhm.
else. No, no more, no less.
And
No
you've just given
less.
me a perfect example. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody say, "Can you coach me through your core values?" I'm like, you just did it right there. Because the other thing I want people to understand is that there are probably things that you can look back through your life and see them show up
Right.
consistently, one over, and it may be just one that shows up that way, and the others may be just underneath it. Part of the exercise that I do, because I do have a free version.
Hmm.
Excuse me, drinking coffee that's going to make me burp on air. That's just terrible. Um, hey, once you hit 50, it doesn't matter anymore. But what I help people do is see that everybody's core values are not only just different, but they have a different definition. So even in that free version, you do a definition of the word, right? So for you, you said integrity, trust. I would invite you to go deeper on that and see what it really is. And a lot of times, if you look at what the negative piece was and you flip it to the positive, ChatGPT is amazing for this. Google's amazing for
Right.
this, right? It's like I felt betrayed in that moment. What would be the positive thing that if they hadn't done that, what would be the positive word of that, right?
Mhm.
Um, but another thing I do when I use in my coaching program, which is I have a digital course and then we do coaching around that, walking through that digital course, is I help them do some kind of visual representation of their core values. And so far, it's everybody's have been different, meaning mine is a little bit of a Venn diagram. I
Mhm.
have the ability to freely think, belonging, and authenticity. And authenticity still feels like a very nebulous word for me, but the reality is those other things I have to show up in authenticity in those other things for it to work. And
Right.
the real me is at the intersection of those. But I have
Mhm.
another client who, for her, the top one was strategic. And then it kind of cascaded down into hers. So it was almost like a waterfall piece. Another
Mhm.
one, it was a bit like bricks.
Mhm.
And it wasn't that they had a different visual, it's that literally the way their core values showed up and interacted in their life was just a little bit different. So when you understand that, you know how to build whatever it is you want to build. So I encourage you, take that integrity and trust piece because they might be two separate ones, but they might be one. And when you mix those words together, there might be another word that comes up.
Mhm.
And then you define it for yourself. And then it becomes a statement of, hi, I'm Corey. And this is who I am. This is what I believe. And if you want to be in a good relationship with me, this is how I'm going to expect you to interact. And when we
Right.
can do that with our families, like I said, my top core value is freedom of thought,
Mhm.
which is another, when I said early on, if I hadn't noticed with Amway and Mary Kay that I had to sell things the way they wanted me to, and then I
Mhm.
hadn't noticed that I was picking up and trying to espouse specific interpretations of spiritual truths or biblical whatevers, if I hadn't noticed that there was incongruency and conflict in my own brain by that time, something was clearly wrong
Yeah.
because freedom of thought is a thing and I want to be able to explore all the options. And my husband used to say, I have pictures on the wall behind me. I don't know if this is this video podcast. Um,
It's both.
Oh, okay. So if anybody's watching, you can see I have like succulent pictures on my back wall, but um I do that because it's really hard to keep things alive in here. But um my husband used to say things like, Wouldn't you agree that?" And then he would make a statement. And I just until I figured this out about myself, I didn't quite know how to answer. I felt like I was damned if I did and damned if I didn't. And I hope I can say that on here. But it was just like
Of course.
it was just if I say yes, then I'm like agreeing that just whatever you want me to say. If I say no, then I'm being combative and I don't want to hurt my relationship with it's just like, ugh. My mother would literally take a picture on the wall and say, "Isn't this pretty?" And I would have the same problem. And I could not figure out what it was. Neither one of them were interested in influencing what I thought. They were interested in sharing what they loved or liked with me. And they just did it in a way that was a little assumptive, right? They just were assuming that I would
Eating.
agree with them. Um, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna, you know? Um, but every once in a while, I would have to say to my mom, I would say like, I'm glad you like it. Or it's like, it brings you so much joy. And the reality is I should have said, oh yeah, it's really pretty. Who cares? But then there's the
Right.
authenticity piece that just won't work for me. So it was just my sister was like, quit banging your head against the wall. Just say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I just can't do it. And so when I told my husband, because I figured all this out, of course, after we lost my mother, I told my husband, I said, it's that freedom of thought thing. So now, instead, what he says is, what do you think about this issue? Or what do you
Mhm.
think about this thing? Because my husband and I met in seminary, we met in grad school. And so we still have, like I tell people, a beautiful Saturday morning for me is sitting across the living room having a thorny theological conversation with my husband
Uh-huh.
and being able to just like pick each other's brains and just like push each other out of that box that we might be in into different places. But he doesn't say, wouldn't you agree anymore? I mean,
Yeah.
he might every once in a while. We'll be married 30 years in May, and he might every once in a while say, wouldn't you agree? And I'll just look at him and he'll go, no, 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 what do you think about? He'll correct
Oh
himself.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So your relationships become more transparent and deep because when you do that, you're no longer fighting yourself, right? And I know mine is a unique example, but I'm sure somebody out there is like, oh, I totally get you, right? It's like, yes, that's
It's
me.
so true. Having somebody in your space, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, that you can have these really in-depth, educated,
Hmm.
out there conversations, it makes you thrive. It pushes you. We have the same kind of Saturday morning conversation. So
Good.
not necessarily always theology, but just what do you think about this thing that's happening or that thing that's
Hmm.
happening? And my two best friends are engineers. I mean, they are like off the charts crazy smart.
Yep.
And they'll bring other things and I'm just like, I didn't even know that
Yeah.
that
Didn't even
was
see
even
that.
a
I know.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, when we've talked a lot about women, you know, being in the box and checking all the boxes and staying in this line and feeling like they have to kind of do all the things. What would you tell that high achieving woman who comes to you and is like, I'm done, I'm ready to pivot, I don't know where to go or what to do? Where do you start with her?
I start with I want to know what she knows about herself. I want to know how well she knows herself. And I had some what it was actually a really good client and then a friend of hers and both of their very different kinds of businesses but both very high achieving women and they ended up with very different ways of handling all of this stuff. One of them ended up she had 3 businesses going and what she ended up closing a business in the middle like a digital business in the middle of a launch.
Mhm.
One of them inherited a restaurant kind of chain franchise from her family. And so very different ways of handling things and doing things. And the first thing I say is, well, let's just talk about who you are because most of us are not even asked that anymore. We
Mhm.
are we are given the opportunity um, to fit into somebody else's ideal or to meet a standard, and we're not given the opportunity to say, can I like raise my own standard? Can I be my own
Right,
person?
right,
And so a lot of times the reason why I do the coaching is because we're so far into that that we don't even know how to get out. We can't even see that we're in a box. We can't even
right.
see that we've been limiting ourselves. So if a woman gets to a place where she's coming to me, she's already started that process.
Yes,
Nobody comes to me that isn't curious.
right,
Nobody even resonates with me that isn't interested at least a little bit on some kind of level to say, but what if? And I meet them more, the ones that aren't necessarily looking yet. I spark their interest through a podcast interview like this or workshops that I do, like with the Leader Lab in the Chamber of Commerce. And I've gotten some women that have wanted to work through that. But a lot of times they're not necessarily ready. I have
Mhm.
4 women who are ready. I'm starting your core values coaching, and they haven't yet taken that. They haven't actually taken the step and pulled the trigger and whatever. And so I just wait because something's going to happen that's going to make it enough. And
Yeah,
many times, even if it's not somebody with their own business, many times we can figure out how to honor your core values, whether or not you stay in the job you're in. And when you
right.
talk about pivoting, sometimes it's not even, just for example, somebody who's been through a lot of education to get where they're where they are, like an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor. They've gone through a lot. They may have a lot of debt, and of course, they feel this amazing amount of guilt if they think they can't do what they want to do. But if
Right.
we can help her understand how her core values can be honored in that situation, it may be a different organization because of the values that that organization espouses,
Right.
or the people that she's directly working with. Um, it may not be leaving the profession,
Right.
especially if it's something that they love. And I've had women say, "I don't want to leave this. I love helping people." Okay, well, maybe you need to be a general practitioner and not a researcher at an institution.
Right.
Maybe, maybe you need to just be just that kind of pivot that doesn't have to be a wholehearted leave it all behind. Now,
Right.
I did the wholehearted leave it all behind, but it's just, but this is why I work with people this way.
Well, and so many of us have so much expertise that allows us to move and be fluid and go
Hmm.
back to education if you want to, and move over here, that we don't recognize that we have.
Oh, no.
And so many of the women that I work with are just beginning to realize that. Like,
Mhm.
oh, there's this whole other world out there that everything that I've done for the past decade or two would absolutely fall in line with.
Yeah. And that's hard to see sometimes. It's hard to see what I call a crosswalk of where your skills and your abilities and your wisdom actually plays a part. And just to speak to that wisdom really quick, one of the things I never recognized about myself is that I had wisdom, is that I
Mhm.
have wisdom to offer.
Yes.
And I just saw myself, and this was a pattern that my mother said, "Oh, I'm just a bubblehead." And no, my mom was smart. It took her 14 schools and like 30 years, but she graduated magna cum laude. And, she figured out how to build townhomes, 16 townhomes in Seoul, Korea, without any project management experience in another language for our mission. And she ended up doing the Red Cross thing, and she
Mhm.
handled all of the generals that were in charge of the UN forces in Asia and the Pacific. I mean, she could do all of those things, but she portrayed herself, and that I think is a little bit of a coping mechanism for many of us, especially in the South. We portray ourselves as not a threat.
Right. Yes.
And that was kind of her thing. And I
Because
did that.
oftentimes we're seen as a threat.
Yeah. And so we want to make sure that we don't get torpedoed because of that. And so, and I'm learning, like, in this new team that I'm on, working on this project, I'm the rabble rouser in the room with these guys who are retired military, West Point teachers, war college teachers, West Point
Mhm.
grads. I am the one who's not buttoned down. I'm the one who ends the call with a 38 special song. I'm the one who says, "No, no, I'm going to die on that hill. We're not going to back off on this."
Mhm.
But all that to say, I think I may have lost my own personal train of thought. But knowing that, oh, I know it was about wisdom.
I was gonna say you're talking about wisdom.
Yeah, blah blah. I portrayed myself as the blah, 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 person, but when people would come in my office and shut the door and say, "I really just need to talk to somebody," I thought, "Oh, well, evidently I can hold space really well, or I'm welcoming," and that's true. But they wanted to know what I thought. When I gave my notice, I had a brilliant young doctor researcher come to me and say, "What am I going to do if you're not here to help me, like, do my grants?" It's like, "You give me such really good advice, and you're so wise." And I'm like, wow. I mean, this is, if you've been in medical fields or research
Oh
fields,
yeah,
this
my entire
dude.
career.
Okay, I did not do my research to see what you did, but this
That's
guy was
okay.
what they
I'm a
call one of
physical
those rock.
therapist.
Oh, okay. So this guy was one of those rock star hires, right? So he's like one of those that they're going to pull out all the stops and bring whoever trailing spouse around and make sure that they give him all the extra money, even if he doesn't get a grant, but he's probably going to. And quite frankly, in his first year, he got like 3 grants or 4 grants from the NIH, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we can't. These are overlapping. We can't accept both of them. Which one do you want? It's that kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
And those kinds of experiences, or having a former staff member who worked for somebody else at this point, because I'd helped her go, show up at my office in the middle of a panic attack to say, "You're the only safe space I knew to find."
Mhm.
All of that started, for me, I was over 50. So at 40, I'm so glad that you're recognizing it. We have been around the sun. We have experienced things. I've been around the sun a certain number of times, and you pick up,
Right.
hopefully you learn something. And so being willing to say, I have wisdom to share, and I don't need to push it on people. But if they
Mhm.
ask my opinion, I need to be willing to share it with humility, with grace, and be willing to say, "Oh, I could help somebody else not take the long way around like I did if they're willing, and that's their own wisdom of taking the advice that's given. But yeah, to be willing to say we all have a certain amount of wisdom and we don't recognize it.
Well, and I am so glad that you really took a moment to point that out, because that is kind of key so much to my personal message. And what I hope to do and work with other women is we have value and worth to offer the world.
Mm.
And so many of us don't recognize it for years and years, or we've allowed other people to say, you don't bring value to the table, or you're
Mhm.
not welcome here, or,
Mhm.
my time's not worth your time, or whatever. And when we can surround ourselves with other women like you, put ourselves in rooms with other women who look to us and collaborate with us, it helps us all recognize we have that wisdom, we have
Mhm.
that expertise, we belong in that room, we're here for a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And another way I say it to close things out or to help people understand is if you think of the most elaborate holiday dinner
Mhm,
and everybody is a dish at that dinner,
mhm,
everybody is different. My family did the whole like at Christmas, it was the special sweet potato casserole and this, that, and the other. And it's like
mhm.
the green bean casserole needs to be there for some people and the sweet potatoes
Right,
need to be there and the turkey or the ham and what I mean, it's like, but if you don't come to the table with those unique pieces that you bring, then we're missing that dish, that
right,
big celebration and festival of humanity is missing something because you didn't bring your dish to the table. And I
right.
don't mean for that to come across in a shaming way or a guilty way. I want it to come across as this spot is reserved for you, right? This
Yeah,
little hot plate or whatever, it's here for you. And we need it there because it's what brings the good color to the table. It's what brings the aromas. It's all of those things that your favorite dish might bring to the table. You bring to the table. And
yeah,
we need that. And I love that in your message.
yes. I'd love for you to speak just a minute on confidence and
Mhm.
what true confidence means, real lasting confidence, and how you help your clients get there.
Well, I think it goes all the way back to your core values that true confidence is understanding who you are and being willing to say, I won't compromise on that.
Right.
And it comes from, there's a concept called the confidence competency loop. And this is outside of ourselves, right? It's like we become competent in something, therefore we're more confident about doing it. And that just is a spiral that keeps going. It's the
Right.
same for understanding yourself. It
Mhm.
is the same when you are competent in understanding you, right? When you know who you are, when you know all the components of that dish that you bring to the table,
Mhm.
then you know that you're showing up with all of the things that make you who you are. And there is no need for apology for who you are. Do we all have something to learn? Sure. But there's other work that you can do. You can look at what skills do I have to offer? Where do I need to mitigate an aspect of my personality that is either not helpful to the situation I'm in, or who can I augment with? Because I'm one of those people that if you ask me in the hall if you can have the week off, I'm going to say, I'm going to assume that you've done your work and found somebody to cover for you and you have the amount of time. And I'm going to say yes. But if you don't follow up with an email, I'm going to forget. And it's going to show that day is going to show up and I'll be like, where is so and so? And it's not going to be good.
Right.
And so I know myself. So follow up with an email, right? So when we have the confidence to tell people, I'm going to trust me, and this goes back to your point, I'm going to trust me and I'm going to trust you, then the amount of extra leverage we have to pull or the amount of I don't know, rule following that we have to do, it falls away.
Mhm.
People see you as yourself when you're confident and people can see truly who you are. They
Right.
respect you for it. They
Mhm.
like you for it. And it's to me, it's a whole different definition of the word charisma. I grew up, I'm a Gen Xer, so when we hear charisma, we think of people like a used car salesman. It's like very
Right.
jaded,
I know it's very, very different.
very jaded. And but I would present maybe somebody, if I'm going to stick with my own generation, and older, is somebody like Audrey Hepburn, who just had this charisma about her. Everybody kind of wanted to like be around her and follow her. And she was kind of that quiet confidence. Confidence doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be
Right,
brash. It just needs to be you. And
right.
so that's what I work with my clients on. I help them to understand who they are and how they can be confident in those boundaries that they set, in the tone that they take with people, because when they understand what their own core values are, that's the other piece about it, is you can start recognizing other people's. If
Yeah.
I'd known you for a while and I watched you through some of those things that you described, relationships or jobs, I probably would be able to say, yeah, integrity or trust, that's an issue for Corey, you know? And when people start seeing those kinds of things in each other, even if it's just one core value, like my
Mhm.
husband is all about justice. I mean, 1 to 10, everywhere on the spectrum, all four sides of the quadrant, it's like justice. And so when anything happens that is against that, I mean, I recognize that, and I've been around him long enough. He won't do a core values exercise, but I can see that, and that helps me let him be who he is. So as a
Right.
leader, as we start doing our own work, and then we can see in other people, oh, this person really needs their space. This person loves to be involved in all the projects. This person, and it may be a belonging issue for them. When you can start seeing that, you can start meeting people where they are. You give people a little more grace in whatever downfalls they might have. It just helps us overall. And that's a kind of confidence that we don't really talk about a lot. And I think it's a kind of confidence that will help us lead into the future and bring the next generation along with us.
When you talk about leading and leading teams where every single plate, every single dish is so important, that doesn't happen so often. I mean, I've
Hmm.
been in the room with so many people and they are like, oh my gosh, this job is sucking my soul. And if they could just move laterally and
Yeah,
use their strengths in a different way, it would be a completely different
sure.
atmosphere for them.
Yeah.
This has been such a beautiful conversation. I want to make sure that our audience knows how to get in touch with you, any workshops that you have going on, any events. So, how do they do that?
Well, I am the intentional optimist, which we didn't really talk about, but that came out of my work that I did when my mother died. I decided what I wanted to stand for. So I have 6 tenets of intentional optimism, but you can find me at theintentionaloptimist.com. I have a podcast called Stand Tall and Own It, and it's for purpose driven women who want to lead with authenticity and impact. I'm getting off here and recording episode 217, so it's been around a while.
Love it.
Um, and right now it's all just solo work, but I do, if you're in the Central Virginia area, I have two conferences coming up in October. The Live to Lead, John Maxwell Live to Lead conferences, and part of that will be a keynote workshop from me on core values. So but you can always find me online, Instagram, LinkedIn. I will respond to DMs if you tell me that you heard me on Corey's podcast here, because then I'll know you're not spamming me. And so reach out, see if there's anything that I have that can benefit you, because that's my goal.
Yeah. I love it. I can't wait to hear all that you do with your master's and your PhD, maybe, and everything else that's happening. I just have loved this conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Me too. It was my pleasure. Thank you, Corey.
As we close out today's episode, I want to leave you with this. Your next level is already within you. If you're feeling that pull for more clarity, more alignment, and more courage to step fully into who you're meant to be, this is your invitation to take the next step. Whether you're an entrepreneur ready to scale or a woman standing at the edge of something bigger, the path forward starts with trusting your desires, owning your worth, and leading with your inner knowing. This is exactly what I offer. Private VIP coaching, and where I guide women inside the 10K Club and 50K Club through consulting with She Sells and Superhuman Selling to help you gain clarity, step into aligned action, and build a life and business that reflects your highest vision. If you're ready to explore what's next, let's have a conversation. Book a free call now at www.corywinn.com/free call. I can't wait to connect with you. Talk soon.